with transcriptions, and we'll be sharing the slide deck as well with guests. Very off-putting transcription. I've just started seeing it repeat myself back to me. The AI is already working very well. Please do keep your microphones muted as you're joining. I can hear there's actually probably a couple of people already coming in. I will try and be on top of it in terms of clicking the mute for yourselves, but please do keep yourselves muted, especially in the first half where we'll be presenting our work. And lastly, as I said, please also use the chance to introduce yourself, use the Teams chat, ask questions, share resources, answer each other's questions. We'll be monitoring the chat as we go as well, especially to pick up questions for the Q&A and discussion in the latter parts of the presentation. But it's also a chance for you to pick each other's brains as well. So without further ado, if we go to the next slide, I'll pass over to the director of LOTI, Eddie, for a short introduction. Eddie.
Hi everyone, just to welcome you on behalf of the whole LOTI team. Really pleased to see so many people interested in today's theme. In case you're new to a LOTI event, just to share, we are London Local Government's collaborative innovation team. We help the boroughs and the Mayor's office, our colleagues at the Greater London Authority, work together on innovation data and tech projects to improve public services, very relevant to today, help them be high-performing organisations and tackle big issues, including the future of what we do with all the pressure on adult social care. And it's with that context that we bring you the thoughts from our colleagues at faculty today. And just on the next slide, in case you're wondering who is part of the LOTI community, we're a membership organisation composed of London boroughs. The ones here in pink are the ones who are current LOTI members, 28 of the London boroughs, as well as the GLA and our host organisation, London Councils, which represents all the boroughs and the City of London on a whole range of different issues. Finally, from me, just thank you for joining. I will hand you back to my colleague Sam and colleagues from faculty to tell you the detail of why we're interested in this theme. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. And yes, I think great to see so many people joining from LOTI members, but also outside of LOTI members as well. I think for the introduction from our side, before we pass over to faculty, I think the opportunities for the use of AI in adult social care emerge from two particular areas of interest and excitement. I think the first is obviously the challenging environment of local government, and local government services meant that in LOTI we're really keen to help our members find new and innovative ways of delivering their services in ways that also save them money and help respond to some of the financial pressures facing councils, whilst also improving the quality of care that we give to residents. And coupled with, I guess, the excitement around AI as this new exciting emerging technology, we really wanted to dive into adult social care as one of the service areas where we could do a little bit more in-depth analysis of what those good opportunities might be for ourselves, coupled as well with a separate stream of work on housing services that we've also been doing with faculty colleagues. So we're absolutely delighted to have done this work. The reports themselves were out on Thursday on the LOTI website, and I'll pop the link in the chat to the housing to the adult social care report, and you can actually find the link for the housing one there as well. But yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you to faculty colleagues, and they're going to talk you through that work today in this webinar. So thanks for joining, and over to you, faculty colleagues.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's a real pleasure to be here with everyone today. I'll just quickly allow the faculty team to introduce ourselves. So I'm Sona, I'm a product manager at faculty. I have been a former civil servant, worked on lots of government digital services. I'll pass on to Thais.
Great, thank you. Lovely to meet you all. My name is Thais. I'm an associate at faculty in the government and public services team, and conducted a lot of the user research as part of this project. So really excited to share that with you today. I'll hand over to Tarek as well, who's on the line from the faculty side.
Thanks, Thais. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. Lovely to meet you all. I'm Tarek. I'm a data scientist at faculty, also in the government and public services team. I was basically helping out on this project with all of the technical questions the team might have had and all the technical parts of the report. So looking forward to hearing from you all as well.
Great, thank you both. So just a quick run through of the agenda for this hour that we have together. So we will do a quick refresher on what is AI. I'm sure many of you will have done your own learning, given how hyped it is at the moment. But we will do a sort of faculty version of how we like to distinguish between the different types of AI. We will go through the methodology that we took for this particular study. We'll then talk through the prioritized AI opportunities. So the 6 use cases that we have identified for adult social care. So Thais will take us through those. And then we'll have plenty of time for discussion, Q&A, your thoughts, your experiences and stories at the end. So a little bit about faculty. I won't spend too long on this, but just to introduce ourselves, faculty is a data science specialist. We're not a broad digital agency or a management consultancy. We are sort of veterans of data projects in the public sector with over 50 productionized data services under our belt that are helping public servants make better decisions. So we are a leading UK data science and applied AI company. We value shipping data engineering services and do so in challenging and operational environments. We aren't just analysts, we have user experience specialists, we have data scientists, machine learning engineers, the full suite of multidisciplinary teams to build products. And especially with this LOTI project, we've been really excited about playing a role in LOTI's overall mission to build momentum around practical, digital and cultural change in local authorities. So what is AI? To kick things off, we wanted to distinguish between AI, machine learning and data science. If you ask different people what AI is, you're likely to get different responses. Essentially, our version of this and the way we like to talk about it is that AI is a broad concept referring to the ability of machines, computers to perform complex tasks and exhibit human-like intelligence. And this can mean anything from robotics to voice recognition. And so the important thing here is that AI doesn't specify which exact technology is used, but it refers to the complexity of the intellectual ask that is being performed automatically by a machine. On the other hand, machine learning is a subset of AI and refers specifically to the technologies that allow computers and machines to learn from data. So you could say that machine learning is the implementation of artificial intelligence. So that's using algorithms that can identify underlying patterns in large volumes of data and teach themselves to perform a task automatically. So for example, when Netflix knows or makes suggestions of what we could watch next, that's machine learning at play right there. And then data science is an umbrella term that refers to the application of statistical methods to analyze data. So this refers to the collection, management, and analysis of large amounts of data. A data scientist can use machine learning, but there are many other applications. So just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page on those terms. One more slide here I have on this topic. So we also distinguish between traditional narrow AI models and generative AI models like ChatGPT. So traditional AI, often also known as machine learning, is really a fancy name for collection of methods used to identify patterns in data. It's really best for structured data problems and mission critical processes, and generally trained for one narrow purpose. So traditional narrow AI models tend to identify trends, patterns, and anomalies. On the other hand, generative models use the same foundations as traditional models, but tackles 2 of its shortfalls in quite clever ways. So the first is that the high quality models require a lot of data, and getting that in specialist fields requires a lot of human effort. The second problem is models only learn to complete one task, so can only do one thing. Gen AI models containing so much well-structured and accessible information that they can be used to create synthetic and novel outputs, and they're often talked of as fuzzy information retrievers. For example, ChatGPT, which is best used when problems where small errors are okay. So just to distinguish between traditional narrow AI models and generative AI models, that is really making the headlines right now. Okay, so just a bit next on our research project with LOTI. Before we do that, I think we'd love to get a sense from the audience here with us today what your kind of attitude or perceptions towards AI is right now. So we'd love you to plot your number or put your number in the chat where you sit on the spectrum of very worried about it and the risks and implications. And the other end of the spectrum is a 10, very excited about the many opportunities. And somewhere in the middle, if you think that we should proceed with caution. I can see that people are already putting their numbers in, which is great. Similar story to the housing audience, I think. Most people are on the kind of upper end of the scale, which is exciting. We have a 3. Fair enough. We definitely strongly believe, I think LOTI and faculty had a shared passion and interest in developing responsible AI. And so we do have some content in this webinar around the sort of risks and implications and the deployment considerations of AI as well. Fab. Okay, really interesting to hear your thoughts in numerical form. So just to flash up the prioritized opportunities that Thais will talk about. So we've got 6 use cases. So automating the transcription of meeting notes between care workers and patients. The second one is converting existing and generating novel documents into learning disability formats. The third one is matching adult social care data to gather insights for decision making. The fourth one is triaging and prioritizing requests to deal with demand across the front door. Number 5 is improve and encourage self-service for direct payments via a search query tool. And the 6th one is around predictive forecasting to allow for early intervention in care. So like I said, Thais will go through each of these in detail later. But how did we get to these 6 shortlisted cases? So our methodology was very user-centered. We were very keen to make sure that we actually spoke to real users within boroughs. So we spoke to Croydon, Harrow, Islington and Westminster councils. And we had 6 user interviews overall in the adult social care space. But we spoke to 15 people across digital and adult social care teams. So we then produced a long list of ideas, which was scored by users using a prioritization framework, which I'll go into on the next slide briefly. And from there, we developed a short list of 6 prioritized opportunities, and these were the ones which were considered high value and high feasibility. So this is the prioritization framework that we used. So we prioritized a very long list of ideas against a value set of criteria, which included things like speeds up process, reduces human effort, improves service and experience for users, is a scalable solution, and does have tangible benefits. And on the feasibility scale, the criteria were things like data and infrastructure readiness, ease of implementation, ease of development, ease of validation, and ease of maintenance. And so those with a kind of high feasibility, high value score were mostly the ones that were shortlisted. And just a little bit about deployment considerations before I pass on to Thais. I did mention that we were really keen to make sure that we weren't painting an overly rosy picture of how we can apply AI. There are definitely considerations on multiple levels and topics that we need to think about. And some of those are listed on this page. So just calling out a few, so like data privacy and security. A lot of these solutions do require quite a lot of data. Sometimes that's health data, personal data. And so we need those robust security measures and those opt-in measures to make sure that we are kind of respecting user privacy and also considering the security aspect of data as well. In terms of ethical considerations, it's a hot topic, but really, really important to consider users and making sure that we're not exacerbating biases, making sure that the solutions we build are safe and responsible, and making sure that we are taking into consideration the ethical concerns around profit-driven systems in a social welfare context. In terms of skills and capability, just making sure that we are not exacerbating the digital divide. and making sure that we are not further marginalising communities who are already lacking access to digital benefits. When we introduce new solutions, it's really important to gain the trust from the public and users and make sure that we are upskilling staff and users when they're internal solutions. Other considerations around costs and capacity and data and technical readiness, which I think we will probably cover more in the cases. So I'm going to pass on to Thais now, and she will take us through the case studies in more detail.
Great, thanks so much. So I think before we kick off deep diving into the prioritised opportunities, quite useful to cover the sort of key themes that emerged across the different user interviews. If you could just get to the next slide, thank you. One of the first was a disproportionate amount of time spent on collating and receiving or submitting data information, and this can be, lots of form filling. We want people on the ground actually delivering work and doing the things that they do best, rather than constantly filling out new forms and having to pull information from disparate systems to kind of fulfill different statutory reports and get the right information they need to do the work that they do. The second is managing an overwhelming volume of inquiries and requests, whether that's at the front door or beyond, and sort of really encouraging residents to self-serve as well, and not putting all that burden onto local authorities in delivering these services. The third is difficulty in predicting demand and managing resources. We see, an increased level of pressure with multiple, like whether that's comorbidities or multiple sort of needs that different residents have. And, that can get really exacerbated at the front door with multiple requests coming in at different times, and needing to decide where best to put resources and be a bit more proactive instead of reactive to this sort of thing. The fourth is balancing personalisation with a consistent approach, whether that's in producing care plans or in also pulling on sort of past historic cases to be able to apply past learnings to current cases. And I think that personalisation also goes into a lot of the pain points for training and for care workers as well. And the fifth is resource and time burden of direct payments. A lot of boroughs stress that this burden is put on local authorities and case officers, who have to do a lot of that sort of going back and forth and kind of triaging a lot of the cases there. So there's a lot of burden across the piece. So those are the key themes that emerged, and we'll just sort of jump into the first opportunity. I think this opportunity won't be particularly unexpected, and it's the first and probably the kind of easiest to do, and lots of boroughs are already looking into this, and there's some really interesting work going on in this space with different off-the-shelf products as well. This is the automation and transcription of meeting notes between care workers and patients, whether that's live transcription, using audio to text transcription of recorded meetings, sort of live during the meeting instead of, hours of form filling after meetings. I think the key thing with this one is using the technology to sort of understand that it can be flawed. Transcriptions will have mistakes, so it will do a lot of the larger burden of transcribing, but allowing care workers to go in and sort of edit things that may have not been captured, and to use things like generative AI to kind of pull out summaries, to pull out key points that are needed, or be reminded of things that perhaps, you didn't cover in a meeting. So it might, for example, give you a reminder that you need to cover, X or Y in the next meeting. So that might be a very helpful thing to think about beyond just transcribing meetings. It's whether you can use the generative AI to sort of summarize, to pull out next steps as well for future meetings. So I think transcription is the step one. The second step would be thinking about how you can kind of fine tune these resources to fulfill the needs for your local authority or your care workers and the meetings that they are doing, and the sort of things they need, whether that's summarization or pulling out key next steps. So that's the sort of first one, and I would say like the impact of that is extremely high. It would really save time and burden on care workers, but it would also be quite technically feasible. And it's just sort of thinking about how to link it up with your own kind of case working systems as well. So the second one is also very interesting and probably quite feasible opportunity, and I know some boroughs are already looking into this as well, which is converting existing and generating novel documentation into learning and learning disability formats and easy read formats. Social care workers spend a lot of time and resource on converting important documentation into what is easy read formatting, and here generative AI can very easily be trained to learn how to convert documentation into these specific formats. So it's quite an interesting one where you just needed probably a handful of documents to train the generative AI to be able to like convert. And there's a lot of functionality there where you can think about, do you want this to be user facing, or do you want this to be specifically within your authority for adult social care teams to be able to use? And it's probably something that can be done very, very easily and trained with not insane amounts of data needed. So the third opportunity is matching adult social care data to gather insights for decision making. I think this one's quite an interesting one because obviously what we see a lot is people going in and out of adult social care between sort of between health and adult social care, and being able to know when people enter and exit out of the different out of adult social care, and gathering as much data on their sort of entry points, their exit points as well, through record level data matching into kind of a centralized database would allow these sort of greater insights for decision makers on the sort of various touch points, the entries, the exits out of a care journey. And this would only work for this wouldn't be like in-depth patient level information. This would be aggregate groups. And that's in order to kind of keep data privacy and so on. And this would really, having all this information at hand, knowing these entry points, these touch points, would enable sort of faster provision of things like reablement services, could allow, the reduction of waiting times, because you have this understanding that, people often enter here or they require this sort of specific support, for example, entering from child social care into adult social care. So sort of understanding when those movements happen, so that you can, look at resource management and things like waiting times. And this will allow for faster journeys through relevant pathways across the care provision. And I think the way we've imagined this opportunity was that it would be there for just providing insights for decision makers to know when these different aggregate groups require and what they may require at different touch points. And I think data-wise, this would require, forms of healthcare data, care data, and the reason it's tech feasibility a medium is because obviously there does need to be a lot of understanding around it can take a lot of time to receive this data and to sufficiently make it anonymous and protected. But I think this would be quite an interesting one to really kind of allow people to think about when people come in and out of care provisions. I think let's go on to the next one. I think this is quite a classic opportunity as well. So this would be triaging and prioritizing requests to deal with demand across the front door. Currently, I think there are a lot of manual ways that London authorities are doing a lot of this work, which is obviously extremely time consuming. And I think there's also probably not enough prioritization when looking at different types of risk level and levels of harm or complexity across different cases. And this in itself has led to, huge backlogs and increased volume of requests. And often it might not just be the volumes of requests that are increasing, but also the kind of level of complexity around a lot of these requests. So This opportunity is a sort of classification model based on a lot of text data, where it would look at a lot of the queries and cases arising, and it would sort of classify these according to the level of kind of risk it applies. And this would allow these cases to be kind of aggregated and given perhaps a risk level, being able to sort of automatically flag when specific cases might require more time, more effort, and might need faster sort of action by looking at, you'd have a sort of risk prioritization framework developed alongside this to allow different cases to be flagged up as, high risk, need to deal with this now, or, this is a follow-up on a previous case, this needs an update, that sort of thing. So that's how this would play out. And this would look at things like email data or, different, being able to classify text within PDF, and would also be able to pull on sort of past historic cases and accumulate all this information in one place, which I think is something that is quite lacking and makes this problem much more manual and resource intensive. So in terms of the opportunity, it would definitely be trained on past and historic cases, and it would look at how they were handled, by whom, what teams, and it would kind of build out a sort of classification and case prioritization framework. I think what's really important with this sort of thing as well is that it's not an automated process. You don't want these cases to be automatically dealt with just in case, especially in training, the machine is not fully ready to be used in an automated way. So it would purely give sort of risk scores for humans to always make the final decisions and decide how different cases need to be dealt with. So I think it would only ever function as a sort of decision-making tool. It would never be there to kind of automate, as that would be quite risky. But again, I think this is probably extremely feasible and would have very high impact and sort of really reducing a lot of the resource burden that has led to a lot of backlogs in casework. Great. So, and I think the next opportunity is improving and encouraging the self-service for direct payments. We kind of envisage this happening through a search query tool. So again, the problem that arose in user interviews was that care workers carry a lot of this administrative burden for direct payments, where that's liaising between care providers and those receiving the care in a kind of really time-consuming and resource-intensive way. So the tool itself would be a search query tool that allows users to input a sort of search term off the back of their sort of care plans, and it would build out from a kind of a large database where it'd be returned with the most relevant choice for care provision for the specific case. And as part of the technical kind of build, it would require systems architecture supported by a semantic database that would store all the different resources that the London Authority would be able to provide, or pull to different providers. And this would allow for a kind of much more usable front-end interface for people to be able to kind of self-serve. This would definitely, the reason it's sort of tech feasibility medium is because it would be user-facing, and I think anything that is user-facing with use of technology would have to have extensive user testing so that you ensure that the models are performing as you expect them to and pulling on the right sort of information. But I think what's really exciting about this is just how much the different the machine learning models and the different databases can pull on. And I think what's really important here is that you have constant updates to the information provided and so on. So I think that's a really interesting one where it would allow someone to kind of submit queries and information to be pulled out for them. So, and I think the next one is probably a more long-term opportunity that would take a lot more data and a lot more user testing and information in order to work, but it's the predictive forecasting to allow for early intervention and care. And this can be used across those already receiving care and might be at risk of hospitalization. So this this opportunity would use predictive technology, which would kind of flag up the risk level of someone who may be at risk in a specific time frame to be hospitalized. And this would allow sort of early intervention and care to prevent avoidable hospitalization and sort of allow care workers to sort of understand where they might be best to intervene. And this would use a risk identification tool using machine learning, which would sort of use quite classic forecasting and anomaly detection type of work. And the reason why this might take a bit longer to produce is it would require quite a lot of historic training data and access to quite a lot of different types of data, whether that's healthcare data, care data, as well as sort of a wealth of past cases for the model to be trained on. A lot of the data could be things like carer reports, user demographics, and home care data. I think there is a lot of really interesting insight that can be gathered from things like even sleep patterns and physical health and prior hospitalizations. And for example, knowing the number of care visits within a specific time period. And this could also be kind of pulled together with direct reporting from the end user using things like care tech or heart rate monitors. And how this would work was it would accumulate lots and lots of this data, and it would by being able to train on past data where it has seen someone has been hospitalized because their heart rate was a specific type, and they weren't sleeping as well, and their sleeping pattern had been anomalous in that time period, and that was kind of, it reached a risk threshold that has led to hospitalization. So I think this is a very interesting one that would take quite a lot of time to be trained and to have enough sort of user interest and be provided with enough data in order to pull on these insights. But I think it could be very impactful in terms of helping with straining that huge strain on healthcare systems. So those are the 6 opportunities, and I think we'd be really, really interested to know from your side which ones excite you the most, or do you think would have the most impact on your organization. So if you're able to look across these 6 and put your a number in the chat of the one you find sort of more interesting and you think might have the most impact for your organization, or you think sort of excites you most, if you could just pop a number in the chat. You can pop more than one if you find more than one excites you the most. We'll definitely come to questions at the end. There's definitely some interesting questions. Great, we've got 4. Yes, I think 4 would definitely, I'm seeing that one stand out quite a bit at the moment. I think that one would definitely be a very quick win as well, in terms of really lessening the burden for a lot of organizations. Great, this is really, really interesting. Thank you so much for pulling on these. And I do definitely think, having that division of quick win and the kind of longer term opportunities and things you need to get there. Great. I'll hand back over to you, Sana.
Thanks so much, Thais, for running everyone through those. And so interesting to see that, number 4 is overwhelmingly one of the most favorite use cases. Okay, so we're going to move on to some recommendations. These are, as are the use cases. Everything is much more extensively detailed in the report. But just to end with some recommendations here, I won't go through all of them, but some of the ones that I think are most important. So first of all, starting with solving user problems and not just starting with the tech that's currently in the hype cycle. Excuse me. So we think it's really important to consider AI opportunities in the context of real problems that need new in-kind solutions. So really the recommendation here is to start by looking at problems that exist despite your latest software upgrades, problems that are costly to resident outcomes and operational efficiency, because no matter how shiny the AI is, if a problem isn't solved, then it's money wasted essentially. So definitely focus on user problems that definitely exist. The next one is around starting small and doing something and learning and iterating. So the opportunities and risks of AI, we think, are best learned by doing, and there is definitely a place for setting guidelines and strategies and putting governance in place. But leaders must really empower delivery teams to experiment where the value and limitations lie. So our advice here is really to put a squad together, pick a problem, talk to users, ideate on AI solutions, and then test something out. And I promise you, you will learn so much more by actually doing. Another one that I think is really important is becoming more informed and more demanding buyers of technology. So for real change to happen, we absolutely must demand more from our technology suppliers. For example, we can ask for source code to be open for the wider local government community to access and build on. We should demand that data is interoperable, that roadmaps should be transparent, and we really think that local authorities could and should get involved in beta testing of new features and new products. So really being more of a partner, developing a partnership with your technology supplier, and being more kind of demanding with helping you future-proof your technologies. Another one that I think is really important is investing in improving the quality of your data. So we really think this is a no regret move. So while AI capability is advancing at a faster speed than ever before, usable solutions still require good quality data. So that's data that is reliable and trustworthy, consistent, up-to-date, clean, comprehensive. And investing in improving in gathering data and improving the quality of your existing data will give you a head start and unlock adoption of new technologies in the future. And finally, before we move on to discussion, don't skip your discovery and user research phases. So the best technology is informed by robust user research that surfaces real problems that users are facing. Whether the solution is resident-facing or back office, having face-to-face inquisitive conversations with those who will ultimately use the technology is really critical. And we have found time and time again that teams that skip this step or do it superficially almost always end up building the wrong thing. So don't skip your user research and your discovery phases. If there are any that you want me to expand more on, happy to do so in the discussion. But I think we'd really love to hear from everyone on any information that you would like to hear more about on the opportunities, any interesting work that your borough has been conducting in the development and preparation for AI that you'd be comfortable sharing. We'd love to hear that. And yeah, any of the deployment implications or considerations that you would like to know more about.
I really want to see him do well.
Yeah, please do let us know.
Thank you so much, Sonia and Thais, for that presentation. Absolutely fascinating, and we're really, really grateful for all of the hard work you put into creating those reports. As I put in the link at the very top of the call, and I'll put in the link again to the report towards the end of the call, but please do go to the website and download the report and dive in and into the detail, and you can see how we did it and some of the recommendations and the use cases that we came up with. So thank you very much. Please do, as Sonia said, put your questions in the chat as we go. We've got about 20 minutes, so please jump in. If you've got any thoughts, you've got the experts with all the different backgrounds from faculty. You've got Eddie and myself from the LOTI side, but also you've got everyone else in the chat as well who can help answer some of the questions. I think one of the questions from Mark Edmonds was around, for the predictive forecasting, the volume of data required, and I know you answered it, but it's also worth maybe answering that potentially for in a general sense around some of the different use cases. I don't know if any of the faculty colleagues want to jump in on that. Is that feasible, Tarek?
Absolutely. So the forecasting one is the one that would require the most amount of data. Of course, to get the most accurate forecasting and predictions, we would need the most amount of data we can get on our hands, basically, to provide the most accurate forecasts. But like from the solutions we presented, some of them actually don't need much data. The prime example of which is the easy to read document formats, the accessible document formats that doesn't need any data at all from if you really want to stretch it. You could get away with just using Gen AI and configuring it in a certain way to get the result we want without having to ask anyone for any data other than what the accessible documents look like. So there's a wide range of things here. And some solutions need more data than others, but yeah, that's essentially it. And just to quickly repeat my answer to the question on forecasting, with forecasting, you need very granular data. So let's say like daily data or weekly data, especially if you want to forecast weekly or daily. And you would need it over a long period of time. So let's say a few years worth of that data. And the more sources of data you have, the more accurate the forecasting can be as well. So that kind of summarizes everything.
Thanks all. There was a question, I mean, there's a bit of conversation in the chat is around the conversations with suppliers. Did you have any particular thoughts or recommendation on what are the right conversations? What are the right things we should be saying to suppliers? And I know also, Eddie, this is maybe something I can pull you in on as well, because something we think about in LOTI. I'll pass to Sona first.
No, I mean, I was gonna, I haven't actually, we didn't speak to, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Thais, but we didn't speak to the big system suppliers in this project because we were quite short on time. I have spoken to the big system suppliers on the housing side in previous projects, and they would seem very keen to kind of improve their technologies and kind of create a better user experience. But we do know from the other side that often it can be quite expensive to even do simple upgrades of software. And so it's really trying to figure out a way to, you know, I think that's why the sort of beta testing idea is really interesting, is if as a local council you can become a beta tester for features, it just means that you can actually contribute to the solution and make sure that it kind of meets your needs. Eddie, really interested in your thoughts, but also Mayen, who is on the line, who is a former colleague of mine from DLUC. She started the local digital fund with Paul Mortby at DLUC, so they might also have some thoughts on working with the big system suppliers as well. Eddie, go for it.
Well, yes, I mean, I think from our point of view, what we want is the best relationship between local authorities and the best the tech sector can provide. So we know, for more than a decade, we have been wrestling with some of those big systems providers, just trying to get access to your own system data. And this is perennially frustrating. And yet again, here you see that unlimited system access to your own data is a prerequisite of doing a lot of what we want to with AI, in fact, even just basic data models. And so once again, loud and clear, we need to make the case from local government. You cannot say you're an ally of local government transformation if you are charging through the nose for access to system data. So yes, again, this will be something that we want to return to. And there's the lobbying asked there and our engagement, constructive engagement with great tech suppliers to make sure that's really well understood. I think on the AI front, we know we're peak hype cycle on all things Gen AI. Everyone seems to have rebranded as an AI company. And again, I think this is why we were so delighted to work with faculty and just commission our own view on what is actually not the sales pitch, but feel like pragmatic opportunities, plausible opportunities on our terms, not as per the sales pitch. I know the sales pitch is necessary and completely get where that comes from. We've got to be smart and demanding customers ourselves. So as we put in the chat, welcome if you're from a local authority and have got strong views on the types of conversations we should be having. LOTI is a forum to prompt those conversations. Equally for great suppliers, we do want to hear about the good stuff. We want to co-design stuff with you and make sure you are fully aware of what local government needs. But we also need to get these basics right. That system access is absolutely key. I have a low tolerance, just final thought, for companies just developing their own private API just for one other supplier that's just reinforcing the same sort of incumbents. I don't think that's okay, and it's something we need to speak with a louder voice as a local government community.
Just to kind of add on what Eddie and Sona said. So yeah, if your contract is coming up for renewal, absolutely see whether you can add extra clauses for API and data access. I know LOTI has looked at that before with other councils and MHCLG has been doing some aspects of that as well, because we've kind of clarified, as well as Eddie emphasizing that you need the data to be able to do anything with from an AI side of things. And just to kind of reiterate Sona's suggestion of like, start asking your account managers of like, what AI kind of beta testing or POCs are they doing, and put your hand up and say, we would like to work and experiment with, you know, the liquid logics and mosaics of the world to see whether they can build your requirements when they're looking from an AI as well as like data perspective. So all great suggestions.
Thanks. And did someone put their hand up as well, wanting to come in? Farah.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So my question is about if for machine learning and predictive analysis to work well, you need to continuously enter data and update the system with data and experiences. Is that normally done? I mean, I think I know roughly how it works, but is it normally done by the user or by the software company, or combination of both? It's just I am concerned that in some cases the data is old and not updated sufficiently.
So you would usually send, so we'd have like organized batch updates, essentially, where every few months, or we agree on a certain period of time where you might send us a new batch of data when we can reconfigure and retrain the model on this new data, update it accordingly, and just deploy it back to you with all of the updated parameters. So it wouldn't be too complicated of a process on the consumer side of things.
Thank you.
I should ask a question, faculty, colleagues, maybe Tarek, well placed to answer, but one of the common things we hear about data and AI is, you know, junk in, junk out. And I guess the question is, you know, we have pretty low quality data. We have really insightful data for sure in local government, but often it's not in well formatted well, or it's in poor quality. To what degree do you think that's a hurdle? Is that fair to say for all types of AI, all use cases? Is it fair for some? Is it fair for none? What are your thoughts?
So maybe other people can add more, but definitely garbage in, garbage out is a problem with all AI. From what I've seen from local authorities and just any governmental departments, it's they have very rich sources of data, very, very, very rich sources of data, but it's often not well formatted. But thankfully, that's something that is resolvable. Like we can solve that on our end. We just need to quantify the amount of time and make sure we have that extra amount of time we need to process that data and make it usable to the in machine learning models. So hopefully, like with most data, it should be okay, and it's just the formatting that's weird. But yeah, oftentimes maybe the data itself is not of high quality, and we can't do anything about that. We might need to look for alternative sources.
I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, Tarek is the person who works on this stuff like hands-on day in, day out. But yeah, don't data scientists spend most of their time data cleansing, which is, yeah,
Absolutely.
fairly used to it.
Absolutely. Just spent 5 weeks on a project cleaning the data, and the actual project work was 1 week's worth, maybe. So yeah.
Are there any tips, Tarek, like for what maybe, you know, data teams can do to sort of take off that load from the data scientists, and what could they do themselves to start formatting their data better?
I think it's about having clear communication with, so let's say faculty is a company that has a project and he is asking for data. It's all about clear communication between the company developing the AI solution and the data teams themselves. So it's not about just having conversations with people who may have access to the data and just send it to us blindly without like any care or attention to what it looks like, but just having open lines of communication with people who might have more knowledge of what data should look like, and making sure we're on the same page, essentially, on what the data should look like. In the end, we will like regardless of how much we communicate, we will have work to do on our side, and that's fine. That's the nature of it. But as long as the communication lines are open, it solves 90% of the problems. Paul, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, hi folks. I'm Paul Maltby and I look after the public services work at faculty. I was just thinking a couple of examples to bring this data question to mind, because quite often talking with local authorities or other folks in public services, this sense of, I can't do AI yet because we haven't got all of our data properly sorted and finalized is often, I think, a bit of a misnomer. And I just thought, like, let me bring a couple of examples to life to explain that. So quite recently with LOTI, we did some work on rough sleeping across the capital and looking at the patterns of movement of rough sleepers between different bits of the system and between different local authorities. And it's a sort of, I don't know if you'd agree, Sam, but like the sort of project that, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, we would have thought wouldn't have been doable. It wasn't a generative AI thing, it was a traditional AI thing. But it was basically because the data connecting points were just so really difficult to work out whether person A was the same as person B, because sometimes people on purpose give different names, or it's just hard to find people between the systems. And in this case, the project wasn't trying to find specific people, it was trying to find the patterns. And so we used the AI bit, came in as probabilistic data matching to try and work out, is that person likely to be the same as that person? So it was statistically valid, but it didn't need to track every single person. So I think that's an example using traditional AI where because the technology and the techniques are moving on, the data doesn't have to be organized in quite the same way. And generative AI is changing, and large language models especially, changing the nature of this even more so. So we've just done some work with the Government Actuaries Department, which is the folks who do the pensions from in central government and like do the models. And their problem was that they had loads of complex technical policy advice that the actuaries needed to kind of filter through and find the right formula to apply into the mod, the financial models that they run. And again, like just a few years ago, that would have been, you would have to done like a Control F or just search in your sort of your shared drive. But it's really hard to find the right bit of the right report in the right way. Whereas in this example, the large language models are great at finding patterns, and it makes what's look like a really messy set of documentation really good at finding those patterns. So what folks always think is like, is it worth working on your data quality? Yes, it is. It's really important. You can't do anything without the data, and if the meaning behind the data is rubbish, then you're going to have a real problem. But I think often having enough of just the right amount of just the right amount of data that's enough to be able to solve a problem, my experience is much lower than some people in teams expect. And I think often you trying a thing helps you work out whether or not there's something really there, and doing a discovery phase of a data project is a good way forward. Hope that's okay. Sorry, it wasn't too long.
No, thank you. Really, really insightful, Paul. And I think luckily resonates with everything on screen in terms of the recommendations that, yes, investing your data is useful, but also, solve problems, start small, learn if something works, do the discovery, do all the other bits. And I think that's the opportunity with the AI as well, as it's a new, it's a new class of technology and lets us do new things with the same data that we had before, perhaps. And I think an addendum to that, from what I've heard from some of the work in Kingston, looking at sort of that first case study recently with Beam, is that actually the quality of the data we're creating then is actually much higher on average than what some of the caseworkers were creating. So actually, this is sort of helping improve our data sets into the future as well. If we can start doing this, which is, then you can start doing the analysis better and that sort of thing on top. So yeah, great answer. Thank you, Paul. I'm just looking if there are any other questions in the chat. There was something, I think, from someone who I can't find it now scrolling through, but the question was basically, what are kind of the next steps from LOTI on this, and where are we going with this? Are we going to follow these up with actions? Are we going to be looking at rolling any of these things out as projects? I think this is very much the question to LOTI members on the call. So if you're working in one of the LOTI councils, if you're interested in any of the things we talked about today and want to speak with us, then please do reach out. I think we're going to spend the next month or two coming around and socializing these findings with yourselves, trying to work out, is there anything that we can do? We can either help you do individually or as collectives of individuals, or that we could do collaboratively. And if there are any solutions that working at scale is sort of the best way of doing this. I think we want to explore those things, look at the feasibility, but as we say on screen, sort of start small, do things, small things, learn what works, iterate, and take that approach. So we're not sort of sinking all our time and money into a path that might not give the returns, but really practical, feasible things. Otherwise, I think we've got 2 minutes left. I might, unless someone else wants to come in, we've got lots of people touring the office around me, so I'm a little bit wary of speaking for too long, but I think maybe we'll call it there. And I will just say a massive thank you again from my side in LOTI, from our side, with all of the faculty colleagues on the call who joined and put in all of their time and work and effort in the last couple of months to produce these reports. I think fantastic resources for us in LOTI, in London local government, but also local government and the public sector beyond that. So thank you very much for all of your time and effort and coming up with some fantastic resources for us. And for LOTI members in the call, please do reach out. We'll be having follow-up conversations about these things in the future. And thank you for joining this afternoon. I will be sharing all of the reports and slides and recordings over the coming week. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.